Hey everyone, welcome back. Ready for another deep dive.
Always.
Today we're tackling a topic that's both kind of mind-bending A&D, super relevant to everyone who lives in a democracy.
Uh-oh, sounds intense.
Well, yeah, kinda. We're diving into the world of blockchain technology and how it could, hear me out, actually revolutionize democracy.
Okay, I'm intrigued, but I'm also thinking blockchain. That's like cryptocurrency stuff, right?
That's one part of it for sure. BUT, there's a whole lot more to it.
Lay it on me.
We're basing this deep dive on a fascinating essay, Real Democracy Through Blockchain Technology, by Jörg-Owe.
Schneppet, okay.
Yeah, he makes some seriously compelling arguments about how this tech could, change voting, governance, the whole shebang.
So are we talking like a utopian future where algorithms rule the world, or?
Not quite that extreme, but Schneppet does paint a pretty vivid picture of what's possible.
All right, I'm hooked. So where do we start?
Well, Schneppet kicks things off by taking us back in time, like a little historical tour of the Internet's role in politics. He points out that back in the 1996 U.S. elections, candidates were just starting to use email to connect with voters.
Wow, that feels like ancient history.
Right. It's wild how much has changed. Fast forward to the 2000s, and boom, social media explodes onto the scene.
Schneppet talks about that, right? The good and the bad.
Exactly. He acknowledges how social media can be great for engagement, getting people involved, but he also dives into the downsides.
Misinformation, echo chambers, all that jazz.
Yeah, all that A&D he brings up, the growing concerns about data privacy, which, let's be honest, is a huge issue.
Absolutely. So where does blockchain fit into all of this?
Well, this is where it gets interesting. Schneppet argues that all these challenges, misinformation, privacy concerns, and the anxieties around election integrity, which are only getting bigger, right? They create the perfect storm for blockchain to enter the scene.
Okay, but I think before we dive into how blockchain is supposed to save the day, we need a little blockchain 101, right?
You read my mind. I think a lot of people hear blockchain and their eyes glaze over.
It can be a little intimidating. So in super simple terms, think of blockchain as a kind of digital ledger.
A ledger, like for keeping track of transactions.
Exactly. But here's the key difference. Instead of being controlled by a single entity, like a bank or a government, it's spread across a huge network of computers.
So like a shared Google Doc that everyone can see and edit, but no one person owns.
That's a great analogy. This is what we call decentralization, and it's one of the things that makes blockchain so powerful.
Okay, so no single point of failure, which means it's more secure and resilient.
Exactly. And Schneppet really emphasizes how this distributed nature is crucial for blockchain's potential in democracy.
All right, so we've got decentralization. What else makes blockchain so special?
Transparency. Every single transaction on the blockchain is recorded and can be inspected by anyone.
Wait, so it's like a public record?
Kinda. But way more secure and tamper-proof. Schneppet compares it to a giant interconnected puzzle where each piece is a block of data.
Okay, I'm visualizing this. So if someone tries to change one block, they'd have to change all the blocks that came before it.
Exactly. And because of the way blockchain uses cryptography, that's practically impossible.
Wow. Okay, so we've got decentralization, transparency, A&D, insane security. I'm starting to see why Schneppet is so excited about this. But how does he actually see blockchain being used to, improve democracy?
Well, he lays out several compelling arguments, but one of the big ones is this idea of transparency and accountability.
I can see where he's going with this. So if we use blockchain for voting, we could literally track every single vote cast and counted.
Exactly. Every step of the process, from registration to the final tally, would be laid bare for all to see.
That would make it a lot harder to commit fraud or manipulate the results, right?
Right. And Schneppet argues that this level of transparency could empower voters like never before.
It would also make it way harder for bad actors to get away with anything.
Exactly. Plus, Schneppet believes that this kind of transparency could boost trust in elections, which, let's face it, is kind of lacking these days.
Yeah, sadly. So it's not just about making voting more secure, it's about restoring faith in the entire system.
Exactly, making it truly accountable to the people.
I like that. All right, so we've got increased transparency and accountability. What else does Schneppet highlight?
Well, another key argument is about security and integrity.
Makes sense. If every vote is immutably recorded on this decentralized, tamper-proof ledger, it would be virtually impossible to manipulate the outcome, right?
Exactly. Schneppet believes blockchain could eliminate so many of the vulnerabilities that plague traditional voting systems, like hacking, voter fraud, even coercion.
Wow. Okay, I'm seeing the potential here.
Yeah.
So Schneppet's making a strong case for transparency, accountability, and security. But what about accessibility?
Ah, that's another big one. Imagine a world where you could vote securely and conveniently from anywhere in the world using your smartphone or computer.
No more standing in line for hours at polling stations. Sign me up.
Right, this is what Schneepat envisions voting that's more convenient, accessible, and inclusive, leading to a more engaged and representative electorate.
Okay, I have to admit, this is all starting to sound pretty amazing.
Wow.
But Schneepat's not just blindly advocating for blockchain, right? He recognizes there are challenges, too.
Absolutely. Schneepat's a realist. He knows implementing blockchain-based voting systems wouldn't be a simple fix.
There's always a catch, right?
Well, yeah. There are technical, social, and political considerations that need to be addressed. Data privacy is a big one, for example.
That makes sense. Blockchain is all about transparency. But we don't want a system where everyone's voting record is public knowledge.
Exactly. That could lead to all sorts of problems. So the question is, how do we balance the need for transparency with the right to privacy?
Okay, so that's one challenge. What else?
Scalability is another biggie. Can blockchain technology really handle the massive volume of transactions required for a national election?
Yeah, millions of people all trying to vote on the blockchain at the same time. I can see that being an issue.
Right. And then there's the whole issue of public perception and trust. Even if the technology works perfectly, people need to understand it and believe that it's secure and reliable before they'll accept it.
Yeah, it's one thing to build the tech, it's another to get people to actually use it.
Exactly. Building public trust is going to be crucial for the success of any blockchain-based voting system.
Okay, so we've got the potential benefits, the challenges. What about real-world examples? Is anyone actually using blockchain for voting right now?
You bet. Schneepat highlights a bunch of case studies from around the world. In the U.S., for instance, over 70% of states are considering legislation related to blockchain voting.
Wow, that's a lot. Are there any frontrunners?
Definitely. West Virginia, Utah, and Oregon have already used blockchain for casting votes in some elections.
Interesting. So the U.S. is dipping its toes in the water, so to speak.
Yeah.
What about other countries?
Well, Switzerland is kind of a pioneer in this area. They have been experimenting with a blockchain-based platform in the canton of Geneva for several years now.
And how's that going? Are people trusting it?
Seems like it. Studies show that a large majority of participants in the Geneva pilot program feel confident about the system's security and transparency.
That's encouraging. Okay, so we've got the U.S. and Switzerland. Anyone else?
Even the United Nations is getting in on the action. They've been piloting blockchain, voting for refugee populations in some regions.
That's amazing. Giving a voice to people who are often marginalized and lack proper identification, it really shows the potential of this technology to promote inclusion.
Absolutely. It's about empowering people and ensuring that everyone has a say.
Okay, this has been a great overview of Schneepat's ideas and how blockchain is actually being used. But I want to dive deeper into some of his specific arguments. Like, he talks about blockchain promoting a more equitable society. What does he mean by that?
That's a great question, and it's something Schneepat explores in detail.
Okay, let's unpack this whole blockchain and equity thing.
So one of Schneepat's main arguments is that blockchain can level the playing field by reducing corruption and increasing accountability in government.
I can see that. If every transaction is transparent and traceable on the blockchain, it becomes much harder to hide shady dealings.
Right. And Schneepat believes that by making corruption more difficult, we can create a more just and equitable society where everyone has a fair shot.
Makes sense. So, less corruption, more fairness. What else?
Schneepat also talks about blockchain's potential to empower marginalized communities and give them more control over their lives.
I'm intrigued. How does he see blockchain doing that?
Well, one example he gives is using blockchain for identity management and digital credentials.
So people could securely store and manage their own identities, even if they lack traditional forms of ID.
Exactly. This could be huge for people in developing countries, refugees, anyone who's been excluded from traditional systems.
It's about giving people ownership of their own data and empowering them to access opportunities.
Precisely. And Schneepat also sees blockchain as a potential catalyst for innovation and entrepreneurship, especially in developing countries.
So it could help create new markets and opportunities for people who've been left behind.
Exactly. It's about fostering economic growth and creating a more inclusive global society.
This is all really powerful stuff. It sounds like Schneepat sees blockchain as more than just a technology. It's a tool for social and economic empowerment.
He does, and he believes that it can help us build a more just and sustainable world for everyone.
Okay, this has been a fantastic overview of Schneepat's vision. But before we wrap up this first part of our deep dive, I want to touch on one more point he makes. He talks about building a culture of trust around blockchain. What does he mean by that?
That's a crucial point. Schneepat believes that building trust is essential for blockchain to succeed, especially when it comes to democracy.
So it's not enough to just build the tech. We need to create an environment where people trust it.
Exactly. And for Schneepat, this means transparency, open source development, education, public awareness, collaboration. It's about bringing everyone to the table and ensuring that blockchain is developed and used in a way that benefits society as a whole.
That makes a lot of sense. This has been a really thought-provoking conversation, and I'm eager to hear more about Schneepat's vision for the future. But for now, we'll have to leave it there.
Definitely a lot to unpack. All right, welcome back to our deep dive into blockchain and democracy. Picking up where we left off with Jörg-Owe Schneepat's essay.
I'm ready to hear more about where Schneepat takes this whole thing.
Well, he doesn't stop at just, outlining the potential of blockchain. He goes a step further and paints a picture of how this tech could actually reshape democracy.
That's what I find so fascinating about his work. It's not just about the tech itself, it's about the bigger picture, the societal impact.
Right, exactly. And he does this by laying out what he calls the pillars of a blockchain-powered democracy. One of the most interesting ones is this concept of liquid democracy.
Okay, liquid democracy. That sounds cool, but also kind of vague. What exactly does Schneepat mean by that?
Basically, he describes it as a more flexible and dynamic form of democracy where citizens have way more control over their representation.
More control. How so?
Well, imagine, instead of just voting for a representative every few years and hoping they actually represent your views, you could choose to delegate your voting power to someone else on specific issues.
So, if I'm super passionate about climate change, I could delegate my vote to someone who I know is an expert on that topic.
Exactly. And if there's another issue where I feel like, I don't know enough to make an informed decision, I can delegate my vote to someone else I trust.
Okay, I'm starting to get it. So it's like combining the best of direct democracy and representative democracy.
Right. And Schneepat believes that blockchain is the perfect tool to make this happen. It provides a secure, transparent platform for managing all those delegations and ensuring that votes are cast according to the wishes of the citizens.
That's pretty cool. So blockchain could be the key to unlocking this whole liquid democracy thing.
He thinks so. And he also talks about another fascinating concept he calls algorithmic governance.
Algorithmic governance. That sounds a little scary, to be honest. Are we talking about robots making decisions for us?
Not exactly. What Schneepat is getting at is the idea of using algorithms and smart contracts on the blockchain to automate certain aspects of governance.
Okay, I'm still trying to wrap my head around this. Can you give me an example of what that might look like in the real world?
Sure. Imagine a system where government funds are automatically distributed to projects or initiatives that meet certain predefined criteria. Those criteria would be determined by a set of algorithms and smart contracts on the blockchain.
So instead of relying on politicians to decide where the money goes, we could have a system where the rules are transparently encoded on the blockchain and decisions are made automatically.
Exactly. And Schneepat argues that this could help reduce corruption, increase efficiency, and ensure that resources are allocated more fairly.
I can see the appeal, but wouldn't that take away power from elected officials?
It's not about replacing human judgment altogether. It's more about using technology to augment human decision-making and make governance more efficient and less prone to bias.
Okay, so it's like a checks and balances system using algorithms.
You could think of it that way. And Schneepat stresses that these algorithms should be designed in a way that's transparent, accountable, and aligned with human values.
So it's not just about handing over control to machines. It's about using them to help us make better decisions.
Right. And he also talks about the importance of regularly auditing and updating these algorithms to reflect changing societal values and priorities.
That makes sense. We wouldn't want to be stuck with algorithms that are outdated or biased.
Exactly. So there needs to be this ongoing dialogue and collaboration between technologists, policymakers, and citizens to make sure it's done right.
Okay, so Schneepat is thinking big here. Not just about how we vote, but how we govern ourselves. Are there any other areas where he sees blockchain making a difference?
Oh, definitely. He dives into a bunch of other applications like campaign financing, citizen participation, and even the way we interact with our elected officials.
Okay, let's start with campaign financing. That's a huge issue in a lot of democracies. The influence of money in politics is, well, pretty concerning.
Absolutely. And Schneepat recognizes that. He proposes using blockchain to create a system where every single campaign donation is publicly recorded and traceable.
So we'd be able to see exactly who's donating to which campaigns, how much they're giving, and where that money is going.
Exactly. Schneepat believes this level of transparency could help reduce the influence of special interests, level the playing field for candidates, and give voters more power.
That would be huge. It could really change the game when it comes to political campaigns.
Right. And he also talks about using blockchain to increase citizen participation beyond just voting.
I'm all for that. More participation is always a good thing.
Yeah.
How does he see blockchain playing a role there?
Well, he's a big advocate for what's called participatory budgeting, where citizens can actually propose and vote on how public funds are allocated in their communities.
So instead of just hoping our elected officials will spend our tax dollars wisely, we could have a direct say in how that money is used.
Exactly. It's about giving people more control over their communities and making government more responsive to the needs of the people.
That's a really cool idea. What else does Schneepat suggest for increasing citizen participation?
He also talks about using blockchain to facilitate what he calls citizen juries, or deliberative polls.
Okay, what are those?
Basically, they're platforms where randomly selected groups of citizens can come together to discuss and debate important policy issues.
So instead of just relying on opinion polls or the loudest voices on social media, we could have these structured forums for citizen deliberation.
Exactly. Schneepat believes that this could lead to more informed and nuanced public discourse, which could in turn lead to better policy decisions.
I like it. It's about bringing more voices to the table and creating a more inclusive and deliberative democracy.
Right. And finally, Schneepat also talks about using blockchain to improve communication between citizens and their elected officials.
I can see how that would be useful. Right now, it can feel like there's a disconnect between the people and their representatives.
Absolutely. So Schneepat envisions a system where citizens can use blockchain to submit proposals, ask questions, and get responses from their elected officials, all in a transparent and verifiable way.
So it's like creating a direct line of communication that's less prone to manipulation or spin.
Exactly. It's about building a more accountable and responsive democracy where citizens feel heard and their concerns are taken seriously.
I really like that. It's about creating a system where the government truly works for the people.
Exactly. Now, it's important to remember that Schneepat isn't naive about the challenges. He knows there are hurdles to overcome before any of this can become a reality.
Right, we talked about some of those earlier: data, privacy, scalability, public trust.
Yeah.
It's not going to be easy.
Definitely not. But Schneepat believes that these challenges are not insurmountable, and the potential benefits of blockchain for democracy are just too significant to ignore.
It's definitely inspiring to think about how this technology could empower people and make our democracies stronger.
Absolutely. It's a vision worth striving for.
Welcome back for the final part of our deep dive into Jörg-Owe Schneepat and his vision for blockchain and democracy.
Yeah, we've covered a lot of ground, from the basics of blockchain to how Schneepat sees it transforming voting, governance, even society as a whole.
It's been a wild ride, but I think it's important to acknowledge that not everyone shares Schneepat's, super optimistic view.
Oh, absolutely. There are definitely critics out there who have some serious reservations about this whole blockchain democracy thing.
Okay, so let's play devil's advocate for a bit.
Mm-hmm.
What are some of the main arguments against Schneepat's vision?
Well, one of the biggest criticisms you hear is that blockchain technology, while cool and all, is still pretty young and unproven, especially at the scale you'd need for something like a national election.
That's a valid point.
Mm-hmm.
We talked about scalability issues before. Can you expand on that a bit? Why are some people worried that blockchain isn't ready for prime time, so to speak, when it comes to democracy?
Sure, critics point to the fact that right now, blockchain systems can be pretty slow and expensive to run, especially when you're dealing with a huge number of transactions. They worry that conducting nationwide elections on the blockchain could lead to, delays, technical glitches, maybe even security vulnerabilities.
So the concern is that the technology might not be robust enough to handle something as important and complex as our democratic processes.
Exactly. And there's also the fear of unintended consequences. Blockchain can increase transparency, but that could also mean that every single vote is permanently recorded and publicly available. That could raise some serious privacy concerns, maybe even lead to voter intimidation.
That's a really scary thought. We definitely don't want a system that makes people afraid to vote.
Right. Another common critique is that Schneepat might be overestimating the public's willingness to embrace blockchain. I mean, let's be real. A lot of people still have no idea what blockchain even is.
Yeah, it can seem pretty intimidating if you're not a tech person.
Exactly. And even if people understand the basics, are they really going to trust this new kind of mysterious technology with something as fundamental as their vote?
It's a big ask, for
Yeah.
sure. And then there's the whole issue of, even if the technology is sound, what if it's implemented in a way that actually reinforces existing power structures or makes inequality worse?
Oh, that's a huge concern. It's not just about the tech itself, it's about how it's designed, implemented, and governed. Who has control? Who benefits?
Right. It's like any new tool can be used for good or for bad. So how does Schneppot address all these criticisms?
Well, he doesn't just dismiss them. He acknowledges that there are challenges, and he argues that many of them can be addressed through careful planning, rigorous testing, and open communication between, technologists, policymakers, and the public.
So it's about taking a thoughtful, collaborative approach, not just rushing headlong into this.
Exactly. He believes that a lot of the technical challenges, like scalability, will be solved as blockchain technology continues to evolve. And he stresses the importance of building in privacy and security safeguards from the start.
So he's saying that, yes, there are challenges, but we can overcome them if we're smart about it.
Right. And he also emphasizes the need for public education. People need to understand blockchain, its potential benefits, and its limitations. If we can demystify it, that could go a long way toward building trust and addressing those concerns.
Education and open communication are key, it sounds like. So ultimately, where do you land on all this? Do you share Schneppat's optimism about blockchain's potential to change democracy?
I think Schneppat's vision is incredibly compelling, and it's definitely got me thinking. He's asking all the right questions about the future of democracy, and he's offering some really interesting ideas for how we can make things better.
I agree. This whole conversation has been super thought-provoking.
But it's also important to be realistic. There are risks and potential downsides, and we need to be cautious. It's not as simple as just, throwing blockchain at every problem and hoping for the best.
It's not a magic solution, that's for sure.
Exactly. And in the end, whether blockchain succeeds in transforming democracy will depend on us, the choices we make, the way we design and implement these systems, and how we engage in this conversation as a society.
That's a great point. It's not just about the technology, it's about the people.
Absolutely.
Well, this has been a fascinating and, frankly, pretty mind-bending deep dive. I feel like we've only scratched the surface of this topic.
There's so much more to explore, for sure.
And we encourage everyone listening to do just that. If you're intrigued by what we've discussed today, definitely check out Jörg-Owe Schneppat's essay, Real Democracy Through Blockchain Technology. It'll make you think, challenge your assumptions, and maybe even inspire you to get involved in shaping this future.
It's a must-read.
Thanks for joining us on this journey. Until next time, keep those brains buzzing.